Whoa, we got a hot one. Hello and welcome back to the boat shed. Today we are refreshing a whole bunch of parts that are going to go back into this Yanmar motor that we are rebuilding. We're going to do some high voltage powder coating to get parts that look like this to end up looking more like this. But first, let's take a look at that old gearbox that came off in the last video. Today we're going through this Yanmar Kanzaki KM3P Marine gearbox. The goal is going to be to replace all the seals, all the things that can sort of wear out in these to make sure that we have a long service life before we put this back in the boat. Let's get to work. Let's start things off here with the output flange. So we do have a little bit of mild surface rust on here. You don't want anything on there that could introduce any vibrations in the driveline, so you want to at least take a file to that probably to flatten that out. I'll probably just take this to the machine shop since we're doing a lot of work there anyways, and we'll get that just skimmed so that there is a nice surface to mount up the new flange to. Now for removing this nut to get that off, this is a left-hand thread, so be aware of that, and the torque spec is 60 to 80 foot-pounds. You first have to push back a little bit of a lock pin that's in here. Now mine broke when I was doing this, so you'll want to potentially have a new nut standing by. It's about $20 currently. So you will want a way to secure this. You could use a long bar. What we're going to do is just hook up a pipe strap wrench here and then use the impactor, and we're running it in regular forward at the full torque spec, and that nut comes straight off. Running it off that way is pretty easy. Now you might not have access to tools like that, and so you're going to want to use probably a pretty long leverage bar to hold that still. But we have this output flange ready to come off now, and it looks okay. Here we do see there is some rust on the back side of the unit, but it looks like the seal has been doing just fine, and there isn't too bad of a groove worn into here. So I think this is going to be just fine to reuse as it is. And looking inside here, we see the oil seal is a bit dirty, but not too bad. So we'll get a seal puller ready to yank that guy out of here. Let's give this a quick clean before we go any further. And honestly, we probably should have started with that. But at any rate, here we are now, all cleaned up and ready to keep going. So we're going to try and pull these seals out. And for that, I have this Lyle seal puller. And I'll link in the description down below. I've never used this tool yet, so we're going to give this a try. I bought this at the automotive store the other day, and it has a hook on the end that's supposed to dive in and help you pull out the lip of a seal, and then you push against this little fulcrum here to yank it out. So we'll see how it works. It's going to be a tight fit here on the input shaft seal because that is still a tight seal. And then on the output though, we can start there because we have a gap from where we remove the flange. So let's give it a shot here and see how it works. And that has the output shaft seal removed, and it came out okay in the end. It was a little bit tricky if I'm being honest. It's a very small, thin-walled seal, and there's not a lot of meat for that tool to grab onto. So perhaps not the tool's fault, but it is a bit rickety. It's really not my favorite to use if I'm being very honest, after having used it once, but it did work. In the end, it was successful. So we'll be able to clean this up now and press a new seal back in there. Let's flip this over and try it on the input shaft seal, see how that goes. Again, it looks like we're hitting a snag here. So because this seal is pushed in so far, I can't actually get the hook of this seal tool to get in there. I can't even get close enough to it. It just will not fit. It's too deep. We're going to try something else. Using sort of the same principle, we're going to use just a regular dental pick here that I have. Just has a small hook on it. And we're going to put a small feeler gauge in there just to slip in, protect the shaft while we work this little tool and see if we can get that seal to pull out a little bit. If I don't think I can do this without damaging the shaft, then I'm going to have to take this thing apart because I don't want to replace the shaft. It's probably a few $100. Let's see how this goes. It looks like this is working, and hopefully there's going to be no damage to the shaft. I think we're going to be okay. I feel like I'm picking a lock here. Well, it looks like we got it. I don't see any markings on the shaft, so I think that we are totally fine there to put the new seal back in its place. So before we do that, let's take a look at the shift mechanism. Let's take a second to thank some of the new Patreon and YouTube members that help keep this channel floating along. Now, if you're interested in some extra updates and ad-free videos, you can check out the Patreon link below or hit that join button. Now, the folks whose names are appearing on the screen go the extra mile to keep this channel working, and I couldn't do it without you. Thank you all so much. Now, back to the video. The shaft linkage plate here is held on with an O-ring inside according to the drawing, and thankfully there is just a little bit of overhang around the casting here because this thing does not want to budge. After some prying and careful work, it does pop free. It eventually pops free. Reluctantly pops free. Okay, well this is an interesting looking mechanism. Everything in here seems to look okay, I think. We will be replacing this O-ring when we remount this part, so we're going to just gently remove this old hardened O-ring. Now it's off to the vise where I'm going to try to secure this part without damaging it, and I'm going to give that first seal puller another go since it worked better when the inner seal was removed. So I'm just going to cut the inner lip seal out here so I can access that little ledge to hook up on. And it broke. Okay, cool. So I can't recommend this tool except maybe in a very specific application. I guess it's back to the old faithful seal puller here in the end. In this application, it's going to work perfectly. And with that, now all 3 seals have been removed from the transmission. On we go. So this is going to get cleaned up now. We'll get ready for paint, this along with the other parts. I did notice that on the shifting mechanism that goes in here, there are some wear marks that might indicate that it's been scraping on the teeth inside the transmission here, just ever so slightly. So there's a shim pack on the back of this that you can adjust the ultimate height with, and I think we're going to have to dial that in when we go to put this back together. But for now, we're going to start getting these parts all cleaned up, ready to freshen up the paint, put the seals back in, and while we are getting started on that, let's take a look at that crank. The plan is to send this crankshaft to our good friend Gary down in Texas, who has Titus Machining, and he is going to take a look at repairing this keyway. He has an interesting idea to fix that, so hopefully show you that very soon. But first, before we invest that time and energy into this crank, I do want to make sure that it's still in decent shape, the best I can. So I've checked the run out on it, all the journal diameters are good, the pins are good. Everything seems to be in order, but this keyway has had a lot of force hitting it in 2 weird directions. It's not great. So I think what we want to do is, I have some of these penetrant tests from Magnaflux. It's a 3-part system. There's a cleaner, you have your penetrant, which is like a red dye, and then a developer, which helps you to see if there's any micro cracks that you maybe won't see with your naked eye. So I thought we'll definitely focus around the area of the keyway. We're going to try and get this tested and just see if there are any cracks, because we don't want to have a bad crank in there. I really hope it's okay, because this is an expensive piece. So fingers crossed, and we're going to start by cleaning it up. This crank is pretty dirty. It's been living in, black diesel oil for quite a long time, but I think we've got it pretty clean now. So we're going to spray on some of the penetrant. We're going to just do maybe the first third, let this sit on it for 10 to 30 minutes or so as it sinks in, and we'll clean it up and throw the developer on there. I put some more cardboard down because I want to protect this surface, because as you can see from the tip of the can, this stuff gets everywhere. Now we'll let this penetrant soak in for about 30 minutes. That's about 30 minutes now with the dye sitting on the part, and you can see it has kind of moved around a little bit. It's sort of settled, got a little splotchy here and there, but that's probably normal. So let's get this cleaned up and then throw the developer on there. Well, it almost looks like that cleaning took off any penetrant that might be in there, but I think if there's a crack, it is still in there, and the developer should help us see it. But hopefully we don't see anything. Let's see how it goes. And this will take another 10 minutes or so to cook up, and we'll see if anything develops here. And hopefully none of the neighbors are peeking in the windows, because this looks like a crime scene in here. And thanks to the magic of editing, that 10 minutes feels like just a moment has gone by. We're ready to inspect here. So we do see that anywhere that there was dye that was kind of sitting on the part, like inside these little oil holes on the journals and the pins, we do see here the developer has sort of brought up this ring. That doesn't indicate a crack, I don't think. It just means that there's been some dye sitting there. And so as I'm looking over this part, we don't see anything. Anything that's a concern, I guess, which is good. Here we do have some penetrant that's kind of darker here, but I think that's just because there is a bit of rust on the side of this counterweight. And I think that's all that it's happened there, is that there's just some pockets where the dye kind of can soak in a little bit. But the bearings don't ride on that. It's going to be bathed in oil, so I think it's going to be fine. So yeah, I don't see, on the first test, the first half we've done here is basically the first 3 bearings, and we'll do the last 4 next. And this looks good, so let's clean this off and start again. And just like on the other half of this part, I'm only really seeing a lot of dye coming through in areas where I know there'll be a bit of a pool, like in these holes for the bearing journals, and then also here where they've sealed up one of the oil passageways, and on the front face of the crank here and some pins. So that's not alarming at all. Well, this is looking pretty good to me. I think we're gonna run this. We'll box it up, send it to Gary in Texas. He's gonna mess around with the keyway. I can't wait to see what he gets done with that. Let's hope it works. And if you're enjoying this little non-destructive testing bit here in this video, it'd be a lot of help if you'd hit that like button for me. It really helps move the channel along. Appreciate it so much. All right, what's next? Let's clean this thing up and get to work. With the crank cleaned up, I'm feeling confident now to invest some time into the repairs, so I'm gonna box this up. I've heard horror stories though about shipping parts like this, so I'm gonna do my best here to pack it within an inch of its life. And you know how I like to do things. So I sketched up some braces here and caps for the crank so that the pointy ends will hopefully not wind up smashing through the cardboard like a medieval battering ram. Now these are all 3D printed on the pressure machine. It's a great little machine, by the way. So this is just supposed to help locate the parts inside the box. And I'm gonna pack this with extra cardboard and some custom foam inserts that I'm gonna make with a combo of used styrofoam and some polyurethane foam spray. Now I'm finding that this works best to go with thin layers and let them cure, and I mist the foam and the surface of the plastic with a bit of water to help it cure quickly and completely. A few last minute custom notes here for Gary and the shipping company, and this is ready to go. Hopefully we hear from Gary soon that this crank has arrived in good condition. I think we've given it its best possible chance. And speaking of machine work, we did hear back from the machine shop. Now there's a couple things we want to do there, but overall things look pretty good. But he has recommended that we replace all of the components in the head. So that's all the valves, the guides, and the springs. The springs tend to break, so it's just, this is the right time to do it. So we need some parts. And on that topic, this box just arrived from the UK of all places. So let me introduce you now to parts for engines. There's a couple different ways you can go when you're looking for parts. Sometimes you need to go with the OE parts directly from an engine supplier or Yanmar directly. I find that in the aftermarket space, there's a lot of variety in terms of what you're getting. And sometimes I have bought things from like eBay, and that's always a bit of a risky proposition because you never really know where you're getting things from. So Parts for Engines, they do a whole bunch of different parts for lots of different engines. Wouldn't you imagine that? So they do a lot of Yanmar, Volvos, and Perkins especially. If you're in the UK, you've probably seen lots of Perkins engines. And so these guys have all kinds of parts, internals and accessories, common parts, and all of this with a good blend of original equipment versus aftermarket parts. So let's crack this box open and see what they sent us. You know, speaking of Perkins, Antidote actually, most of the Liberty 458s have Perkins engines up to a certain date. Antidote has a Ford Lehman. And ironically, that engine is actually harder to find parts for than the earlier Perkins models. So there you go. And speaking of Antidote, in case you're new here, my name is John, and this boat here is Antidote. She's a 46-foot sailboat, and a couple of years ago, we pulled her out of the water and backed it onto the driveway, built this giant shed over top, and now we are doing a full restoration of that, and we do a little YouTube storytelling along the way. So if you're one of those people that's recently found the channel as we're working on this Yanmar rebuild, I hope that you will enjoy this rebuild as well and stick around, stay a while. So I'll put a link to the playlist right up here. You can check that out. Let's get back to it. All right, so Parts for Engines donated these parts to the project, which is really awesome of them. And so I'd like to say thank you for that. And let's show them what we got here. So first off, we have a complete gasket rebuild kit. This has got the head gasket, all of the seals, copper sealing washers. Looks like everything's in there. Awesome. Okay, this is something I'm pretty excited about. So they actually have a set of hoses here that are made of silicone. So these are silicone wrapped hoses, and these replace the original rubber hoses. And the nice thing about those is that they just last forever. They don't tend to crack as like the original ones do. Let's look at a comparison. This is the original rubber hose. This one's in decent shape. It has gotten a little bit hard over time though, but it's not cracking anywhere yet that I can see. But this silicone guy is gonna replace that. It's the exact right size. So I think this is a cool little upgrade. And they're really not that expensive either. Oh, okay, this is a good one. I'm very excited to see what we have here. So this is the stainless steel exhaust elbow that replaces the original cast iron one. So this will totally freshen up the exhaust outlet. It's all cast stainless steel. Really nice part, actually. I'll show you the original so we can compare. So this is the original cast iron piece. As you can see, it's completely rusted out, obviously. This joint is probably never going to move again. And yeah, this is probably near the end of its service life. I was going to replace it. The original part is about $400, $350 to $400 US. And this part from Parts for Engines, the same price, $400, but it's all stainless steel. So I think that's a pretty cool upgrade. Here we have the rest of the hoses to finish off the silicone hose kit. And this box should have some more random spares in it. So these are some of the parts that I was hoping to get for the rebuild. So these are the, looks like the conrod bearings, big end bearings. Got a new oil cap, just, dress it up a little bit. This is a rebuild kit for the raw water pump, seals, cover, all kinds of parts for that. These are the bearings that go in the block. It's nice to have new ones because some of those were getting a little worn out. Okay, and these look like the standard size main, yeah, these are the crank bearing, the main bearings that go in. And this is the one that has the thrust bearing built in on the side. Great, all fresh, ready to go. So when we put those back in, we'll torque them down and double check those clearances to make sure that everything's gonna fit just right, but those should be right up to spec, perfect. We got some new piston rings here, that's great. 3 sets for the 3 pistons. And I think there's one last thing in here. And it looks like we've got some valves, some springs, and some guides. This is gonna help finish out that head rebuild. So I'm gonna get these parts run over to the machine shop now so they can get started on getting that head refit, and we'll check back in. Well, the local automotive machine shop now has all the parts to get that head put back together. So hopefully that goes off well, fingers crossed. While we wait for that, we have a host of parts in here that I wanna clean up and get pre-dressed up. I'm probably going to powder coat these instead of painting them with the rest of the engine. So there'll be some accents on the engine, and won't that look lovely? So we'll probably do a black, gloss black powder coat. And the reason for that color is because that's what I have. And instead of trying to exact color match it, we're just gonna take advantage of this opportunity to make some contrasting decorations on the engine. So is it necessary? Nope. Is it fun? Yep, here we go. So in the box we have the air cleaner housing, we've got the crank pulley, water pulley, some of the engine mounts, this is the alternator tensioning bracket, engine mounts again, and the raw water pump bracket. So just a variety of cast and stamped steel, hard steel. So the first step in the process here is to clean these parts, get all the grease and grime off, and I'm gonna show you a trick that my father showed me. And you've seen me do this before on the channel. I like to clean stuff, engine-related stuff, with just mineral spirits. So this looks kind of weird. The reason that this is yellow is because it's been used to clean grease before, and it's sort of kept some of the color, although I have been siphoning off any of the sediment. I leave that behind, so this is just clean mineral spirits. Well, dirty, clean mineral spirits. You get what I'm trying to say. So it's not what it looks like. Now, I used to do this in a full-size parts washer, but I've had to kind of cut down on some things. So we're just gonna do this in a little bucket, and we're actually gonna use an old container, and I prefer to use the rectangular containers for this. And I'll show you why. So I'm actually gonna cut the top of the canister open. So obviously be super careful when you're cutting with an X-Acto knife. We're just cutting sort of an opening in the top of this. Okay, that looks pretty good. The idea here is that now I have a little place to work. I can get my little cleaning brushes in here. This works great for smaller parts, and I'll be able to clean them, keep everything contained. The screw cap keeps all of the mineral spirits inside the can, and then when you're done, you can tip it back a bit, open this up, and pour that back into your container right here, this weird looking used mineral spirits container. And you can keep this on your boat or in your shed or garage, whatever, and it's a little mini parts washer, just hanging out for you. There you go. Let's get to work. Okay, so we'll put this in our little washing container. Let's make sure that the, lid's on. And now I'll probably put on my mask and montage this because this does have a bit of an odor and I don't want to get a headache. Okay, so that's got the grease and grime mostly broken down off these parts. They're looking certainly much better than they were. So I think we'll be ready to wipe these down, throw them in the sandblaster, and continue on with those. And now our big bucket here of mineral spirits, you can see, has really picked up a lot of grime in there, and it's turned basically the color of the diesel oil. So we'll pour this back into here, let it settle, and then in a couple of days we should be able to siphon off the clean stuff again. Well, hopefully you found that tip useful. Thanks a lot, Dad. So now let's get these parts ready for the sandblaster. I'll meet you over there. Here now we have a tray of parts that are all ready for powder coating, or just about at least. You can definitely see where some of the metal was in really good shape and other parts have become quite porous, probably from the rust starting to form. So we're going to get these going here in just a second. We'll clean them off. We'll probably spray them with a little bit of this cleaner that we used. This is basically just a pressurized solvent that evaporates and will help get any last bit of grease off there, but these should be pretty clean, and we'll blow them off. Then we have two powders. I'm going to start with a zinc primer for the steel parts, and then once that has just flowed out in the oven, then we'll switch to a black, coat them, and then that should give these parts hopefully a lot of longevity back in the boat. I don't really want to have to do this again, so that's the idea. We're using the Eastwood powder coater for this. It's a great little hobby gun, not sponsored, but it does a decent job of laying down some powder for these small parts especially. I have even done some large automotive wheels with that setup in this small blast cabinet and everything. I wouldn't recommend that, but it has been done here. So anyway, here we go. All right, and that's got the one coat of the zinc primer on everything, and so now we're ready to put on the top coat. And if you're new to the world of powder coating, you're basically using electrical charge to apply that powder statically to the metal parts. So they have to be conductive, and then you get a nice even finish. It's a hard finish. It's a cool way to cover parts for something like this. So I'm having fun here, and we're ready to put the black on now. So we've just let these all get to that stage where the powder starts to turn into that flowed out kind of liquid. And then you want to pull it out right away, not cure it, so we can put the next cover on and get a good bond between them. So let's go ahead and put the black on now, and then these parts will be ready to go back on the engine. The top coat is going on really well here, and hopefully these are going to cure very nicely together when we pop this back into the oven. Now it's hard to catch all of this on camera, this whole process, because I don't have a really good way to look inside the oven, and I don't want to melt my camera. But you can see here that the initial stage, it is just starting to melt. And as I'm adding a new part here that is cold, that pulley has fully flowed out and reached curing temperature of 375 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm going to leave this in here for 15 minutes now, and then ta-da! This is a matte finish, so it actually is going to dull out as it cures, and here is the final result. And I think this came out pretty good. I mentioned earlier that powder coating uses static electricity to make the powder stick, and to prove this point, here is an obligatory slow motion shot of the tool arcing to the hanging wire. So don't try this at home. And this is just rinse and repeat now until all the parts are done. That looks great, and these are all now fully cured parts ready for immediate service. Great, with everything cooled back down to room temperature, these are looking pretty good now and ready to go back on the engine. We are going to stage them first though as we get ready for reassembly. Now speaking of that, I did go ahead and take the liberty to dress up some of the parts that were from the transmission, and we'll be reassembling those, getting that transmission, the gearbox, all put back together in the next video. We should also get the crank back from Gary in Texas. I can't wait to see what he's done with that to get us out of the woods on that issue. Lots of interesting things coming your way. So if you're new to the channel and you are interested in seeing the beginning of the Yanmar refit journey, you can check out this playlist up here. If you want to know more about the giant sailboat refit we're doing next door in my driveway, then this playlist here will take you there, and subscribe button coming in from the right. See you next time. And we're doing a full restoration of this boat, hoping to get it in the water someday soon enough. Delete.